All right. So my name is Lona Rerick. I'm with CGF Architects actually in Portland, Oregon. And more importantly to this presentation, I've been on the LEED MRTAG, the Material and Resources Technical Advisory Group for the last coming on 3 years. So I'm deep in the weeds of this, both in my project work and in my volunteer work. So there are some ways that you can use LEED to leverage your embodied carbon goals. And that's what the kind of focus of my presentation is. There are 3 main credits that you should know about. And I want to challenge you to think about them in a particular way, that you think about how you use them throughout the process of a project. So thinking about MR Credit 1, the whole building life cycle assessment, is a piece that you use in design and you may revisit throughout the project. Looking to MR Credit 2, when you start looking at environmental product declarations, is getting into the meat of how you're going to start to specify and optimize products. And the one that people might not be as aware of is the MR Pilot Credit 132, which actually talks about documenting how well the project actually did in construction. So I think, just thinking about that whole life cycle of a project, because the goal is not to do a whole building life cycle assessment model and call it a day. The goal is to make your project better, to lower the embodied carbon in your entire project and actually get that lower embodied carbon materials into the constructed project. So this is the super boring LEED language, which I'm not going to read to you, but I'll just highlight a couple things. MR Credit 1, it talks about building and material reuse. If you can reuse a building, that is always better. If you can reuse part of a building, that is always better. A lot of us, have some of those opportunities, but are also working on a lot of new buildings or adding on to buildings. So in that case, it's really important to do this whole building life cycle assessment modeling. And so we use Tally in-house, which Building Transparency recently acquired. So that's exciting news, which I'm pretty sure everybody on this call probably knows. So this whole kind of life cycle process might get even smoother now that EC3 and Tally are under the same umbrella. But we use Tally early on in design to identify where the hotspots are. Where are the big targets? I stole both of these images from Kieran Timberlake. You can see on the image of the pie chart on the right that concrete is nearly half the pie. If you have much concrete at all in your building, it's probably going to look similar to that when you do your early hotspot analysis. If you have less concrete, then you might have a different pie. The other thing that you can use early on is just looking at what are the big systems and how can I change which big systems I use. Maybe I use make those early choices to use way less concrete because it's going to be a big impact. Get some mass timber in your project and start targeting those big moves, because if you don't do those big moves early in design, you're not going to get another chance to. So moving on to, okay, you've got your big systems in place. You're starting to really get into design development and nail down what products, materials are in your project. This is a good time to start diving into MR Credit 2 and looking at EPDs. Now, the LEED credit itself, it's not that hard. If your project's very big at all, you only have to count 20 products from at least 5 manufacturers. The most common, sorry, I got some outdoor noise here. The most common EPDs that you'll find are these type 3 product specific EPDs. Those are the ones you want because that's getting right down to the actual products, not an industry-wide, and they're third-party verified. Those count as 1.5 products. So you can see that counting to 20 is not that hard. But that's not really the point. The point of using LEED, if you have a LEED project, is a way to double down on your goals and to push your client to embrace these initiatives you might want to do anyway. So it's just a tool to look at embodied carbon. And the option 2 credit in this has just lowered its threshold. You should Now you only have to count to 5 for this. And if you find, an EPD comparison that shows a 20% global warming potential reduction, that actually counts as 2 products. Uh, I did miss one point that I really want to make sure you guys all know. When you're talking about really any of the materials credits, you're going to want to do a LEED version 4.1 credit substitution. All of the materials related credits got easier under LEED version 4.1. If you're like doing straight LEED version 4, you're going to be in trouble on the materials credits. You're not going to be able to achieve as much as you want to, LEED point-wise, which of course isn't really why we're all here, but you want to deliver that plaque on the wall. So always go for LEED version 4.1. Right now, LEED version 4 is still the law of the land, but you can do a credit by credit, just direct credit substitution. So this is the last credit I'm going to talk about. The procurement of low carbon construction materials actually leverages EC3. You don't have to use EC3, but it's way easier if you do. And the great part about this is it gives you validation that you've actually lowered embodied carbon for the project. So this is actually looking at your as-built project and seeing how you actually did. On the projects that we're working on this with, we're actually having the contractor do this final calculation using EC3. And I just want to make a few more plugs about the power of EC3 before I hand off my time. The Carbon Leadership Forum has created these baselines for the industry by material types. These are fantastic because what it allows you to do is to understand what is good. So in this example, I'm pulling out from the 2021 baselines that just came out a month or two ago and looking at acoustical ceiling tiles. So I know that 14 kilograms CO2 equivalent per meter squared is good in that. And then I can go into EC3 and I can actually look at which products beat that and by how much. And once I know that my basis of design products can beat it by a lot, then I can write it into my specifications and say, thou shalt do this well. Thou shalt reduce your global warming potential for this type of product by at least X%. Better than that CLF baseline. And that will lead, hopefully, to an outcome like this, where when you get to the end of the project, you can show that the project itself, the as-built project, has shown an over 50% reduction. So you can see there's kind of the bones of this idea in LEED right now. But I think, if as we are in the MR tag are starting to talk about the future of LEED, we're really going to double down on that idea of we don't want to just see you thinking about embodied carbon in design or specifying embodied carbon. We want it in the building, but we understand that all those pieces are important. If you don't do the early analysis of the hotspots, you'll miss the biggest opportunities. If you don't optimize by materials and specify the lowest carbon materials, or even better, carbon sequestering materials, or carbon positive, as ILFI calls it, then you're not going to get there. If you don't actually get those products in the project, then you're not going to get there. So that's how we're starting to think about the next version of LEED, is that this whole continuum is really important, that you have to have all the pieces, but ultimately getting it in the building.